Thank you, Madam President. Before I begin, I must first address one of the most outrageous statements I have ever seen in an official UN document. In paragraph 111 of this so-called report, the Secretary General of the United Nations called on Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad to, quote, develop and sign action plans with the United Nations. The Secretary General is proposing a framework of cooperation with the UN, but not with a member state, not with a humanitarian agency, but with the monsters who carried out the October 7 massacre. The same Hamas that tore babies from their mothers' arms and shot them in the head, that raped women next to the corpses of their friends, that burned families alive in their homes, that tortured and kidnapped children into tunnels beneath Gaza. The Secretary General wants to sit across from these butchers, animals, hand them a pen and ask them to sign, maybe to negotiate an action plan. Can you imagine that? In the same breath, the Secretary General calls on Israel, the democratic state defending its citizens, to sign a matching action plan. I could not think of a more perfect example for the moral decay which has infected so many parts of this institution. Instead of holding Hamas accountable, the UN invites them for tea. The Secretary General wants to legitimize them, normalize them, give them a seat at the table while many of their victims remain in tunnels under Gaza. Those paragraphs alone invalidate any and every aspect of this so-called report. Madam President, in July last year, children were laughing and kicking a ball across a field in Majd al-Shams, a quiet Israeli town in the Golan Heights. Then a Hezbollah rocket came crashing down. 12 of those children were killed, with 20 more civilians injured. Children who should have been safe, who should have been in school, who should still be alive, gone in an instant. This is the reality of what it means to be an Israeli child today. But the report before us could not even acknowledge them as Israeli victims. Since October 7, Israeli children have been living under fire, running in and out of shelters, falling asleep to the sound of sirens. For many Israeli children, this reality included being held hostage by Hamas, tortured, tormented, and hidden from their families. The reality was brutal, cold-blooded murder, as in the case of young Ariel and Kfir Bivas. Ariel was 4 years old, and Kfir just 9 months old when they were kidnapped on October 7th. Their lifeless, desecrated bodies were released earlier this year alongside their mother Shiri, who was also murdered in captivity. Madam President, what we have received is yet another document of distortion, an out-of-context report that fails to reflect and verify the real facts on the ground, and worse, switches the roles of victim and aggressor. This year's report continues a dangerous trend. It cites inflated, unverified casualty numbers from Hamas-controlled sources. It accuses Israel of misconduct while completely ignoring Hamas's systematic war crimes. Are we seriously to believe that tunnels under schools, rockets beside hospitals, and command centers under playgrounds are not enough to prove Hamas uses children as shields? This all fits a pattern of bias, denial, and appeasement. Unbelievably, this so-called report also utterly fails to hold Iran accountable for its crimes against children. It was Iran that armed and trained Hamas to carry out the October 7 massacre. It was Iran that funded and directed Hezbollah, which murdered 12 children in Majid al-Shams. It was Iran that fired ballistic missiles at Soroka Hospital just last week, intentionally damaging the pediatric wing. That wing is now in ruins. Iran's indiscriminate strikes over the past weeks have already intentionally murdered 4 children in Israel. When the United Nations refuses to hold Iran accountable, when it attempts to engage with Hamas as a legitimate party, when it ignores the suffering of Israeli children, it is not upholding international law. It is desecrating it. Madam President, in Gaza, children have been abused, exploited, and indoctrinated by Hamas. They are used as shields. They are taught to hate. They are pulled into a war they did not choose. But there is another future, a future without Hamas, a future where classrooms are for education, not weapons storage, where childhood means books and play, not rackets and fear. That is the future Israel is fighting for. That is the future every member of this council should support. We will not accept the grotesque false equivalence between a sovereign democracy and terror regimes. We will not cooperate with a reporting mechanism that has abandoned its mandate and lost its credibility. To the Secretary General we say, the time for so-called engagement with terrorists is over. Genocidal terror organizations like Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, and the Houthis do not need to be approached or begged to sign an action plan. They need to be designated as terrorist organizations by the Security Council and sanctioned. We will protect our children, and we will continue to fight against the disgusting bias that this report represents. Israeli children and children all around the world deserve far better than this biased report and failed mechanism. Thank you, Madam President.
High time.